Hello and welcome back to the NSE 5 journey with me, Ryan. In this next section we're going to carry on with the policy and objects part 2. For those who don't know, you can contact me here on YouTube, on LinkedIn or Twitter. Okay, so touching base on what we've done in our last lesson, we started with the overview of the policy and objects section as a whole, and that included first of all having a look at the import policy wizard. We went through the step-by-step wizard to import a policy into a policy package once a FortiGate was inside the FortiManager. This included a quick conversation around interface mapping, where we said you can have a interface on the FortiGate like port 1, port 2, port 3, and you can map it to different names inside the FortiManager like WAN and LAN, and then when you apply those policies to the WAN and LAN interface and install them downstream onto the FortiGate, the mapping will know which port to apply the policies against. We had a quick look at which policies to import. We had options to import all the policies or particular selected policies, and again all the objects or policy dependent objects, which were objects that actually were required as part of a policy package or part of a policy within a policy package. And then lastly, during the wizard, we looked at how to handle conflicts when importing. When importing something into the FortiManager, if it already exists, we had the option to overwrite it with what was on the FortiGate or keep what was in the FortiManager. So when you install it downstream onto the FortiGate, it's the FortiGate that is overwritten. We had a quick discussion with add-on revisions. We said an add-on revision is essentially a snapshot of both the policy package and the object database, whereas if you were to create multiple policy packages, the object database would remain the same, and we talked about the problems that may cause. We said that when you have a large install and you install it onto the FortiGate, it's normally wise to create an add-on revision, and in this video we're going to explore add-on revisions in more depth. We also briefly talked about the target installs, where you can install a policy package to a specific VDOM, a specific device, or a mixture of both, and we would explore that in more within this video. And lastly, we're going to touch on add-ons again. So we talked about the policy and objects section, just like the rest of the FortiManager is split up into individual add-ons and the benefit that brings, but we also have this new concept of a global add-on. And in this video we'll have a look at what that global add-on allows us to do. So moving on to our first topic, which is add-on revisions. An add-on revision allows you to create a snapshot of all the policy and objects at a given time. This snapshot can be made at any point within the FortiManager, or it can be made as you install a policy package downstream onto the device. Revisions can be locked to prevent auto deletion. It's wise to ensure the add-on revisions are created during big changes. So as you make a lot of changes to the database, a lot of policies changing, a lot of objects, maybe some security profiles are having like a rehaul or revamp, and you decide to then install it onto the device, it may be wise to create an add-on revision before doing so you have a quick snapshot to move back. And if you choose to revert to a particular add-on revision, it will revert all the policy packages and objects based on that revision. A revision diff can be performed between the revisions in the right-click menu. So what do I mean by that? Let's jump in and have a look. Okay, so here we are inside the FortiManager. You can see I've gone ahead and put a FortiGate into the FortiManager and ensured that the configuration sync, so the device manager is all happy and the policy package status shows installed, so I've correctly imported the policies. If we click on the policy and object tab, you'll notice I have just on the left hand side under the policy package, I have the default policy package, and I have the FortiGate VM64, which is the policy package I'm currently using, which was the package that I created as I imported the current configs or the current policies. And you can see that I have just 3 basic policies, completely random, that I created initially on the FortiGate and installed as I imported it into the FortiManager. So what we're going to do here is just down the bottom here, underneath firewall objects, we're actually going to create a new object, and we're going to call it test, and we're going to give it just the 10.0.0.1/32 host root as a address object, and then we're going to create a policy. So up here, create new, and we're just going to fill out this information. Let's say it's port 1. Let's give it a destination of port 2, destination addressed. Let's put test, the one I just created, and we're going to deny it, and let's just hit OK on that. And you can see just on the bottom there, it created that new sequence against the policy package. Now to get this onto the FortiGate, as previously shown in the last video, we'd follow the install wizard. But what's different here is we're actually going to create a revision. You can see it asks us for a revision name. We're going to call it test 10. Any comments that you want to add against it, and if you want to schedule a particular time for it to install. In this case, we're not too fast, we just want to install it onto the device. We're going to hit next. We're going to select the device we want to install it. It's going to run through the validation and check whether there's any errors. Once it's happy, it gives us the option to preview or download, but we're kind of just going to jump ahead and click install. Now what's going to happen now is the FortiManager, hopefully it's using the correct syntax on the root ADOM as the FortiGate device, and it's going to install the configuration downstream onto the FortiGate. Once it's configured and the FortiGate is happy and back in sync with the FortiManager, we're going to have a look at the ADOM options that is created for us. So now that's all installed, we're going to go up to Tools, and you'll see we have ADOM Visions. Opening this will show us that we have one ADOM Vision. It's the 3rd revision that's been created against this device. The other 2 were previously created and deleted. You can see I've given it the name test 10, who created it, when it was created, and the comments I added against it. Now if I was to create, let's say, another address object, let's call this test 2 and give it another /32 host and hit OK, and go back up to Tools, ADOM Visions, right click and view diff. What it's going to do is look at the ADOM Vision that we created when we installed the policy package onto the device and compare that to the current ADOM Vision that I've got inside my FortiManager currently, and you notice that it's found one difference. If you click on the details, you notice it's the address object that I've created. Now we can download the difference as a Excel sheet, open that up in Excel, and we can compare the difference. Now we've created a second address object, we're going to create another policy for it. Let's say port 1, destination port 2, and here test 2, we're going to deny it, hit add, sequence 5 is created, and then install that downstream by creating another revision, calling it test 20. Okay, so now that's done, if we go back up to Tools, ADOM Vision, you'll see that I have now 2 ADOM Visions, ID4, which is the most recent one, and ID3. If we right click on ID3, we have the option to restore it or view the difference. Another way to create ADOM Visions, let's say we have a bunch of address objects that we've created and maybe some new antivirus profiles we've assigned to some policies, and we want to take a snapshot rather than having to install it onto the device. Then if you go up to the ADOM revision section underneath the tools, you have the option to create new, where you can essentially create an ADOM revision, lock it if you wish to prevent it from auto deletion, and then create it, and it will essentially show you up here as in locked. And again, the new ADOM revision is created. Remember what these are. These are snapshots of the entire ADOM, including any policy packages or object database that links to the ADOM. So in our next section, we're going to have a discussion around install targets. So what do we need to know about install targets? First of all, policy packages, they can have multiple install targets. So we said a policy package is essentially a package that contains a bunch of policies, and they reference an object database within the ADOM. Well, if you have a policy package, let's say for example a set of standard firewall policies that you maybe apply to a branch office, you can install that policy package onto multiple devices. Those devices can be actual FortiGates, or inside each FortiGate the individual VDOMs, because remember, the FortiManager license is consumed by both the FortiGate and the VDOMs. So if you had a FortiManager with a license of 10 and you had 10 VDOMs, then a single FortiGate with 10 VDOMs could consume the entire FortiManager license. Since we can install multiple policy packages to multiple devices, you need to also keep in mind only one policy package can be installed on a device. And when you go into the installation screen, you can have a look at what policy package is installed. And how do you get to that screen? Well, you're going to select on the Policy and Objects tab within the FortiManager, and then from there select the policy package you're interested in, and then click on the Installation tab. And again, just what I said there, you have the ability to roll out the policy packages to multiple devices. So let's jump into the FortiManager and have a look at this Installation tab. Here we are, back into the FortiManager. You can see I've got my policy packages. On the left hand side, I've got FortiGate VM64 and the default policy package. But where we're interested is actually just here. You can see within the policy package, you have the policy section, where outlines where the package, well, what the actual package contains. But there to the right of that, you have this installation, which shows you which devices this policy package has been installed on. Here. If we were to click on default, for example, and click on the installation tab, you can see the FortiGate, or the single FortiGate that I have, is being added just by clicking on add. And let's say we add all the FortiGates in here. And obviously, because I've only got one FortiGate, you're only going to see one entry. But what you can notice here is the policy package shows not installed. Whereas if I go back to this guy, we can see through the installation tab that this has been installed onto this FortiGate. If you had multiple FortiGates and multiple VDOMs, when you click add, they're essentially going to show up here, and you would add it to the installation tab. Once you add it to the installation tab, you can install it onto those multiple devices. It's going to be quite tricky for me to show you that because the VM platform for the FortiGate doesn't support VDOMs. So I could go through the process of installing and deploying another FortiGate, but I think you kind of catch the drift where understanding from high level what the install targets allow you to do, which is to install a policy package onto multiple devices, whether that's a VDOM or FortiGate, and you do that by adding the device to the installation tab and then click an install, and it will push it down to the multiple devices. And again, the policy package status would show you installed if the policy package is being installed, i.e. has this package been installed on this FortiGate, and if it's not, for example here, the default, click on installation, you can see that's not installed. Okay, so moving on to our next section, which is global ADOMs. So global ADOM, it contains global objects. So just like a normal ADOM contains normal objects, but instead of policy packages, it has global packages. And inside these global packages, we create things called header and footer policies. Now, to keep in mind with header and footer policies, might seem pretty obvious, but I'll mention it now. Header is at the top and footer is at the bottom. Now, what do I essentially mean by this? Well, these policies are applied above or below policies within an ADOM. So a good example of this, let's say we have a particular range of IPs that we never want the customer to be able to access. Maybe it's our internal network, maybe it's the way the network's set up, whatever it may be, what we can do is we can create a header policy to always deny access to a particular IP range. And then regardless of what the customer does with inside their policies, because we've created this header policy inside the global ADOM, the rule set will start from header policies through the ADOM within where the customer policies sit, and then finish with any footer policies we have within the global ADOM. So essentially it allows us to create policies outside the customer's ADOM that's either above or below the customer's rule set without the customer having any ability to change this. So normally FortiManager users can't see these. The global ADOM is only normally assigned to administrators. And when we create global policy packages, but we essentially assign them to which ADOMs we want the policy or the global policy packages to be in effect against. So what we're going to do now is jump in and have a look at this. So we're back in, and the way we're going to get to the global ADOM is to first of all turn on ADOMs. So we're going to go to System Settings, and then from the System Settings inside the System Information widget, we're going to click on Administrative Domains, click Enable. Once it enables, it will kick us out. The reason it will kick us out is because the GUI needs to change, and once the GUI is changed, when we click on the Policy and Objects tab, you'll notice obviously we've got the ADOM section, but more importantly we have this global ADOM, and you can see inside this global ADOM we have the ability to create header policies and the ability to create footer policies. And just like inside the ADOMs, we have the policy packages, but they're called global policy packages. Here what we do is we would create header policies or footer policies inside a policy package, and once we've created it inside the policy package, we would go to assignment and we would add the ADOM that we'd wish to put this particular package against. So in this case we want to put the default global policy package against the root ADOM. What this essentially will allow us to do is, again, if I had a policy where, let's say I allow ICMP to 8.8.8.8 to Google's DNS servers, and I put it as a header policy, regardless of what the customer configures inside their ADOM, they can always be able to have the ability to ping Google. Obviously we have to be careful when we put these policies in place because there can be some damage caused, which is normally why the global element of the ADOMs are only given to administrators. Once the assignment has been done, obviously it would come up with pending changes. You can see it just here, and we have to click the Assign Selected. Once we click Assign Selected, we get an option where we assign use objects or all the objects, and we get the ability to automatically install the policies. Once it's all done, you can see the status shows up to date, which means that the default policy package and any changes that I've made within this policy package has been installed successfully, or in this case assigned, the keyword being, to the particular ADOMs. In this case, just the root ADOM. Okay, so that's all we've got time for in this lesson. Just to review what we've done. We started with a recap from the Policy and Objects section, part 1. We then had a further look into the following 3 items. First up was ADOM revisions. We said a ADOM revision is a snapshot of both the object and policy packages that are inside a particular ADOM. And it's recommended when you're making large changes and installing them downstream onto the device that you take a snapshot before doing so, and you can do that through the install wizard or within the Policy and Object tab. We then looked at the install targets. We said install targets allowed us to have policy packages installed against multiple devices or multiple VDOMs, maybe even a mixture of both. The idea here is you can install the policy package once to multiple devices. And then we finished up with an overview of global ADOMs. Global ADOMs are ADOMs that sit above every other ADOM in the hierarchical view, Normally, access to global ADOMs are assigned only to administrators, and they have the ability to create global policy packages and assign the headers and footer policies within the global policy package to particular ADOMs. This will allow, regardless of what the customer is doing inside the ADOM, to have policies above or below the rule set that takes effect, and the customer or engineer managing the ADOM can protect, delete, or preview.